Mr. Landry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Geithner, if I ask you a question that you answered already, I apologize. I had to go to a committee to vote. You know, it's frustrating on our end because I hear your comments that, you know, you tried to place the majority of the burden on the larger banks because it seems like they were more at fault as to this meltdown. But yet, I don't hear them crying as much as I do the community banks. Why don't we just waive the community banks from Dodd-Frank? And then if that is the case, then we could allow the community banks to go back to being community banks, because they're crying more than the larger banks under this bill. So how can that be if what you're saying is we tried to place more burden on the big banks than the small banks?
Dodd-Frank did largely, not completely, but did largely leave small banks out of it. But I think if you listen carefully, the large banks are complaining much louder. They're spending a huge amount of money trying to undo, shift the burden, delay the reforms that are targeted at them and their risk-taking. They're spending a huge amount of money trying to block, delay, erode, weaken, walk back. And I think it's important to businesses and small banks that you guys don't let that happen, because, again, why would we want to put the country through what we went through in this crisis, where so many innocent victims were left bearing the consequences of a lot of mistakes they weren't part of?
Well, look, I'm with you. I'm trying to protect our community banks, and it leads me into the next question. You know, I started several businesses. One of them, the first one, actually using an SBA loan, and I was always under the impression that SBA loans were kind of a bridge to help the little guy out there when the other banks weren't able to or didn't want to lend to him. But yet my community banks are telling me that now, in fact, I had a real-life example of where there was an application by a business owner to invest in a business, and he had great credit, he had plenty of collateral, but the examiners wouldn't allow the community bank to make the loan because they felt that his business plan, he couldn't prove that his business plan could continue to pay the note. Well, if that was the case, a lot of us would I would have never been able to start my business. But yet he was able to get a loan through small business. And what concerns me is that here we have the private market willing to take the risk, but yet we're moving them to the taxpayer who is going to take the risk when the private market would gladly take the risk. And they're pinning that on the regulators. Why would that be? I mean, is that the effect that y'all guys would like?
I don't think so, and I agree with you. And I think that you're right that the challenge in this is you have to figure out how to put out a financial fire, make sure you open up the credit channels again when they're stuck because of a crisis, but do so without creating more dependency on the government over the long run or crowding out private markets from financing. I think we've actually been very, very successful at doing that in the financial system as a whole. And the terms of these loans, these programs, are established in a way where as conditions improve, as people are willing to take more risk, as the private markets come back, then it will not be economically attractive or sensible for banks to rely on the government for these programs.
So you say in that example should not have happened?
Well, I don't. Again, in a crisis for a temporary period of time when the markets freeze up and private investors pull back.
But this was like in the last 6 months.
I think now you should see the balance shifting. And you're right. I think your point is we should not create a system where government programs are crowding out private capital from financing that. Absolutely. And I don't think that we face a meaningful risk of that. I don't think we do.
As long as I have y'all commitment that that's not what y'all trying to do.
Absolutely not.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Geithner. I yield back.